Hey, mate, how about yourself?
There we go. Take two.
Yeah, that's it.
And sorry about last week. It was just one of those weird old weeks. So I was a bit rattled by me mate, actually. So anyway.
No, that's all right, mate. That's completely understandable, mate. Like I said, I've been through that similar sort of stuff. So yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
Completely understand. You need that time to sort of grieve a bit and get your head right.
That's it. Hey, is this sound all right?
Yeah, mate. Yep, that's all good.
All right, mate. Let's get into it.
Too easy, mate. So first of all, thank you for joining me, coming on and having a chat with me, mate. Really appreciate your time. I know everyone's time these days is pretty valuable, so I really appreciate it.
No worries, Jamie.
I'll just get into what I do about my page. So my page, I try to go to local games over here in WA, seniors and juniors. I take photos, videos, do reports and stuff like that, and then share it to my Facebook page, promote all the local clubs and all their events and stuff that they have.
Yep.
But I also do share NRL news and all that sort of stuff that comes up as well.
Beautiful. Hey, mate, I'll just plug in the power because I think I don't know if I'll get through the interview without this lead in. So just give me 2 seconds.
No, you're all good, mate.
All righty, here we go.
Yeah. There we go. All good.
All good. Mitchell, all good.
So just getting to your career, mate. You debuted 98 for St George against the Raiders.
Yes.
You played 98 Balmain, 2000 to 2003 with the West Tigers. And then you go over to play a couple of games for London Broncos and then go to play for Salford, mate. You look back in your career or anything sort of in particular that stands out for you, makes you sort of think, wow, I had a pretty good career, or anything could have gone better?
Definitely. Well, they could have gone better, and the best part probably of the same thing where 2000, the Tigers has come together, and I was nominated as a Rookie of the Year in 1999. I didn't win it. I think Matty Orford or Mick Vella, one of those guys, may have won it, but I was nominated on the shortlist. So I assumed after a full year in first grade, the next year I'd definitely be in the side. But that's when the merger happened. And I'd only been through the merger 12 months early with St George. So St George were merging with Illawarra. And I just had a look at the team list. And Luke Patt was coming through and others and Nathan Blacklock. And I thought, this might be too hard basket. So I'd signed the deal with Balmain. And then 12 months later, the same thing's happening there. And I thought, you know what? I've played a bit more first grade now. So I'm going to hang around and just, grab the reins and have a real crack. So in 2000, the first trial, I got about 5 minutes. The second trial, about half a game. Third trial, half a game. And I thought I was the informed player going into round one, the very first game for the Tigers. However, on paper, I still thought it wasn't going to stack up. There was a heap of Origin players like Matty Sears and the McGuinness boys. And I just didn't feel like they were going to pull the trigger. And all of a sudden, Wayne Pearce said, mate, I'm going to run with you. And I was just so nervous the whole week. I was actually so nervous when I drove out to Campbelltown. I'd been nervous all week that I'd had too many nerves, and I just marched. I just went to that game knowing I was going to kill it. And as it turns out, I scored a hat trick. It was against the Broncos, and Fox gave me the player of the round, and that sort of was away I go. And I was getting sort of panned in the press that week saying, who's this bloke? Why is he the fullback? And I was, I could prove the critics wrong. So that turned out to be a great season. It was the year of the Olympics, so the season finished quite early in August. And that was probably also the undoing of me. I had this great success early into the Olympics as a 19-year-old or however old I was, 20 or whatever it was. And then this long, long off season of having a good time. And I never really got back to where I possibly could have got to. But, I've got no regrets about it. It was a great time and great memories, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was looking at your career, like your stats and stuff. I mean, you were at the West Tigers. You're the most. You had the most points by a player in a game. Record for most points of the season. And the only person that sort of beat you later on down your career was Brett Hodgson.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's nothing to be sneezed at. You had a hell of a career.
Yeah,
So,
it's okay, Jane. Like, you'll interview people with far bigger careers, but you know what? For me, from where I come from, I was never the superstar kid, and I know you're broadcasting this from over in Western Australia. I'll never forget this, and I'm coaching a bit of touch footy at this time, and it's reps, and kids miss out. It's heartbreaking to see kids miss out, but I always remind them of stories like, Danny Badiris is one. I could tell you about the Danny Badiris story later, where he used to miss out on a lot of teams, and all of a sudden he ends up the most capped New South Wales captain, I think, when he retired. For me, I remember going on an under-15s country tour to Perth, and we all turn up to the airport, and you've got your bag, and your bag's got your jumper with your number in it. There's only 20 kids going, and I've got jumper number 20. It's a long flight when you're number 20 of 20, and I get over there, and I didn't get much time, and I came back with the tail between my legs, and, like under 15s, and you start to question, am I actually going to make it and whatever else? And as it turns out, that trip, I was the only player in that whole squad who played first grade. So I often remind the kids that, well, it's just, you get knockbacks in life, and maybe they sometimes the best gifts come badly wrapped. They serve as extra motivation, and those kids who it all comes too early, maybe they get complacent like I did after my early success at the Tigers. So it's heartbreaking at the time when you get rejection, but sometimes it serves you better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good thing for advice for kids when they get older. Your rejection is part of the game, and you just got to find a way to deal with it.
Absolutely.
How did you deal with like we were just talking about before, your two mergers that you went through with St George going to Illawarra, then Balmain with West? How did that sort of, like, you personally and noticing around the clubs, how did that?
Yeah, it was really hard, because it was just a lot of uncertainty. First of all, the Tigers, just getting back to the Dragons, I was very comfortable that moving to the Tigers was the right call for the reasons, and I still stand by that. And they went on to a grand final in 99, of course, but I didn't watch that grand final in 99 thinking I could have been part of that. I didn't feel like I was missing out at all. 2005, I did. I'd been overseas, I'd come back, and I was scoring 1 million tries in reserve grade, and I felt that I should have been in that team. But that all said, Sheensy won the comp. So ultimately, the reins he pulled, which includes leaving me out of the team, was the right thing. But I must admit, it was very hard to watch, even though I was so happy with my mates to win that grand final. But back to the Tigers and the merger, a lot of uncertainty. There was talk around us merging with Parramatta, and then you had the constant speculation as to what players were going to sign. And I actually, I don't think I've ever told this story, but I was the last player signed on the list of 25, which was quite frustrating because I'd had a decent season in 1999, the year before. However, Balmain as a team didn't necessarily have a great season. So you can understand why we weren't a priority. But I remember speaking with Martin Bullock, who was the original CEO. And I think I was on 60 grand in 1999 with some match payments. And then in 2000, they offered me the same deal. And I was like, how can you offer me the same deal? Like, when you saw me last time, I'd played 3 first grade games. And now, since then, I've played 20 odd first grade games, nominated as a rookie of the year, and you're offering me the same contract. And they've said, well, mate, you've got to sort of take it or leave it. You're player number 25. And they said, if we want to be honest, you played 19 games last year, but in a far weaker side. We're going to sign you for 2 years, and we actually think you'll play 3 games in the first year, maybe 3 games in the second year, and then the third year is when we're investing in you to sort of really skyrocket. So I thought, okay, well, if that's what you think, why don't you do this? I want 80 grand a year. You guys want to give me 60, and you reckon I'll play 3 games in the first year and 3 games in the second year. Why don't we meet halfway? Why don't you give me the 60 grand contract and give me $3,000 a game? And then whatever I earn in the first year, that's my contract for the second year. And then you give me the $3,000 a game again. And I said, so by the maths of what you're suggesting, I'll get the 60 grand, plus I'll get three games that you think I'll play at $3,000. So that's 69. And that means I start on 69 the next year, plus you think I'll play an extra 3, which would take me to 69 and 78, which is halfway between the 60 you want to pay me and the 80 I want to get. And they said, done. Well, I played 26 out of the 26 games in the first year. My starting salary for the second year was 138, and I played 25 of the 26 the next year. So, it was just backing yourself, and anyway, it worked out okay for me.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a hell of a contract, and you proved them wrong by playing those extra games, mate. You go over to London in 2003 and play for the Broncos and Salford in 2004. What was the reasoning behind going over to England, mate?
I wasn't playing great football, and what had happened was the major sponsor of the West Tigers was Radisson Maine, who they sound like a famous brand because we've heard of Radisson and we've heard of Maine Nicholas, and their emblem was a pride of lions. So everything was familiar, and they had signed with the West Tigers, but they had ripped me off to the point where I was that close to going bankrupt. And so a player of my size, you had to be the quickest in the team and the fittest in the team to survive in the NRL. And if you're 5% off that, you get eaten alive. So I went from being leading point scorer, third in the try scorers, making breaks all the time, busting tackles, all those sort of things, to the next year or the next couple of years having dealt with these idiots, a lot of stress, and I wasn't doing the weights, and I was taking shortcuts, and instead of goal kicking for an hour after every training session, I was goal kicking for half an hour, and that became 10 minutes and 5 minutes, and some days because I was so preoccupied in the mind. So I just, I wasn't getting big offers to stay in Australia, and I got a nice offer to go to England. So I thought I'd do that. And just on that, we're over there at, I signed 2 contracts, Salford and London Broncos. And I loved my time at London Broncos. And what had have to happen was, if Salford didn't get promoted, I'd stay at London. If they did, I'd have to go to Salford. Salford did get promoted, so I went to Salford. But as it turns out, about halfway through the year or later in the year, Kevy McGuinness turns up, who had played at West Tigers, right? I said, "Oh, Kevy, what are you doing here, mate?" And I said, "He's one of our players leading because there's a quota system." And Cliff Beverley was there, Mark Shipway, Sean Rutchison. And as it turns out, none of them were leaving, right? So I couldn't understand how Kevy was joining our team, given that we had a full quota. He said, "Mate," he goes, "I'm Irish, bros." I said, "Irish?" He's the most proud Indigenous Australian person I've ever met, but surname McGuinness, right? So he'd gone over there as an Irish player. Anyway, over time, the English Rugby League worked out, hey, this McGuinness boy, fine player, but he ain't Irish, right? So Salford had to get rid of a player. And they didn't want to get rid of Kevy because he was one of the best players in the comp at that stage. Sean Rutchison was on his last contract, Shipway likewise, and Cliff Beverley loved it. So none of them wanted to go. So I had to come up with, my dad was power of attorney back home in Australia. And I was getting this house built by this Radisson Maine. And this builder had been sending my dad letters saying he wanted to take me to court because I hadn't paid him any money. I'd literally written a check for 170 grand to Radisson Maine to pay him. They kept the money and then doctored up a check to say they'd paid him, but it was only like 170 bucks that they paid him, not 170 grand, right? So I decided, and this is my upbringing, to, that guy did nothing wrong, right? So it's not his fault that he's been building this house with the right intention. He's got a family. So I paid him, right, twice. And then I thought I'll sort out Radisson Maine later on. So I'm making calls in the middle of the night, which is not helping the football. And ultimately, they're disappearing. They left the country, landed in London. They're trying to escape. They ripped off a stack of people, got extradited back from Heathrow Airport to Australia, and went to jail for about 8 years each. But that didn't help my scenario. So I was fast running out of money, and I was this close to getting bankrupt. So I went to Salford and said, guys, because I had to come up with £85,000 pronto to not get bankrupt and sell our house in Sydney. So I said, I'll leave the club because you've got this quota situation. However, I need £85,000. And they said, done. So that was great. However, there was a massive asterisk. The asterisk was, only if the club does not get relegated. So I had to spend the rest of the year trying to help the club not get relegated, therefore come last. Second last game of the year, we're playing Castleford, and I'll never forget this. I had this kick from right on half time from out near the sideline, and it's the ugliest kick. I struck it really badly, but somehow it just plonks over the post, right? And ultimately, that one kick would save us from getting bankrupt. Later in the game, it's Castleford are coming at us, overlap. If they shift it, they score. They shift, winger open, drops the ball over the line, and relief. We win the game. We're not going to get relegated. I'm going to get paid the £85,000 and we're not going to go bankrupt. And it was such an unimportant game for anyone watching that game. There was like 4,000 or 5,000 people there. No one would have been watching it on TV. But for me at the time, it was the most important game of my life. So, yeah, that's how that all played out.
Yeah, right. Wow. That's a hell of a story there, mate. That's far out. Yeah, I can't believe that, that company, major sponsor of the team, tried to rip his off. Mate, that's, absolutely ridiculous. That sort of leads me into another question I got. A dark time or depressing time that you've gone through in your life, and how did you sort of get out of it?
Yeah, well, we actually were supposed to, and I want to share this because a lot of people go through the same thing, and I think it's good to normalise it. We were supposed to do this chat a week ago. A mate of ours had passed away, a mate of mine had passed away, and I was totally fine handling because he'd been sick for a while. And when the news came through that he had passed away, I was really good about it. I knew I was too good about it. And then the day that we were supposed to record this interview, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. I was just like, it had finally caught up with me, and I don't often get anxiety. I might get it once every 2 years, and I was still coming into the radio. And when you've got anxiety, which some of your viewers may have experienced, it just drains a lot of energy out of you, and you're trying to get up and you're fighting your body and emotions. And I just got home after those 2 nights of radio and I just immediately fell asleep. I just was so exhausted. So that was a more recent one, but I'll never forget the Tigers had won the grand final, and Daniel Fitzhenry, who's a mate of mine I really like, and he played great throughout the final series. Throughout the season, I probably should have had his spot, not throughout the finals because he was great, grand final was great, but I probably deserved to have a shot throughout the year, and he'd probably say the same thing. But anyway, Tim Sheen stuck to his guns and he was ultimately proven right. But I'll never forget, I couldn't bring myself to go to the grand final as part of the team and watch it because I didn't feel up and about. I was watching it at my in-laws' house and Fitzy scores in the corner. And it was literally like a knife going through my chest, like I was so torn because I was so happy for the boys. But then, at the time I thought that could have been me, a grand final try scorer. But then in later years, I sort of think, you know what? That couldn't have been me and it never could have been me. And the reason being is that, if I played the game, it's a pick a path story, right? So one run where I turn left where Fitzy went right, or a ball I drop or catch or whatever, the whole game, it's a pick a path changes. But we may never see the Benji flick pass and the whole thing is a different path. Maybe we win really easy. Maybe I score a hat trick. Maybe I have the worst game of my life and the Tigers to this day still haven't won a premiership, and it's because I had a shocker, so you'll never know. So as things have gone past, I've really accepted that it wasn't supposed to be for me. And maybe maybe my personality, if I won a premiership, maybe it wouldn't have inspired me to achieve other things that I have in life. And so I'm really, really comfortable now that I didn't win that competition. But at the time, we had a baby she was born the night that the West Tigers pretty much announced themselves. It was a Friday night. They flogged Manly. Hodjo scored, Benji scored a few, I think. And we were off to the hospital and we had our firstborn baby. So the first half of the season, I was scoring 1,000 tries. I was super fit, point to prove. But the back half of the season, when we had our first child, we'll get no sleep. She had silent reflux, and I'm driving around the car at night, just hoping for her to go to sleep. And so my form later in the year was really starting to come down. So again, justifying Sheensy's decision. But after that grand final, maybe a week after it or whenever it was, the wife and I were starting to fight because I was probably unhappy as a person as to where I was in life. I was unsure where I was going. And we actually later separated for a period of time. And I thought it was final at the time. We've since We got back together and we've got 4 kids now. And we've been happy for 15 years, but at the time, my whole world was just unraveling. And I remember driving a car and I pulled over on the side of the road and I just started crying, fit grown man's crying and just, it was, if anyone's ever been through depression, I'm sure that was depression or anxiety, whatever, you feel at the time that it is absolutely the rest of your life, but it's not. And if anyone who's watching this and is going through it or has gone through it, you'll know that it's not that forever. And you just got to keep punching on and get through the other side. But that was, Jamie, that was a really, really tough, heavy time for me.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I mean, I've gone through depression myself, mate, so I know how it feels.
Yeah.
It's a shit of a thing. Like, I got to the point where I said to myself, I've got to go see someone about it. So I went and got on medication and stuff like that. And then I was only on them for about a year, and then circumstances in my life changed, and I didn't need to take the tablets anymore. The people I was around, and things like that. So it's, for me, like, advice I would give to people as well is, talk about it. Talk about your mental health stuff.
Yeah.
Don't hold it in.
I had a mate recently who's been struggling, and you know what? It doesn't discriminate. This person's a good looking, fit, great person, and it's not unusual that it just doesn't discriminate. And he said to me that he's been helped through it, and I need to speak to Brad Fittler about this, Freddie. But Freddie has this mantra, apparently, BEST, best. And I want to get him on our radio program with Brian Fletcher, and I want to talk about it to help people. But I believe best is breathing, energy, which may be exercise and all that sort of thing. The S is sleep. He thinks the sleep is important. And then the T, talk. So Freddie talks about, walk toward uncomfortable conversations. Most people walk away from them. So walk toward them. And a mate of mine, he said that, the mantra by Freddie Fittler, best, BST, certainly helped him. So I'm going to look into that a bit more, and hopefully our listeners on the radio over here and on SEN in Sydney, you can get on the app, by the way, little unashamed plug. I'd love to get Freddie on to talk about that in particular. Yeah,
definitely, mate. Yeah, absolutely. And, he's come up, he's been able to, turn the Blues around, with just his little intricate things. So, that best thing, mate. Yeah, sounds like a hell of a thing, mate. You'll have to let me know when it's on, and I'll podcast it on.
Yeah, for sure, Jamie.
Just go back to when you were a kid, mate. Did you have an idol or a hero that you sort of looked up to? And if so, who? Why was it? What was so special about him?
We grew up in a really tough upbringing. So I'm the oldest of 6, and we moved to. I would have went to 11 schools, so that's not easy. Always being the new kid, having to meet people, but the one thing that was consistent in my life was a football. And I'd always find the local park, and I'd be down there forever, just kicking and kicking and kicking. I look back on it now and go, geez, how did I have that energy? And it was just, if you're passionate about something, you can just do things, And I was always doing that. And Ricky Stewart was my idol. And I think when you're a kid, and my kids sort of do the same thing, you sort of gravitate towards the winning teams. And when I was sort of coming through, the Canberra Raiders were the winning team, and it was Ricky Stewart for me that, what's funny, like Ricky Stewart, he never gets in the immortal chat, and he probably never will. However, of all those great players, they could function without any of them, but they could never function without Ricky Stewart, So he was absolute, and I'll be practicing that torpedo bomb. Like back in the day, if you could do a kick, one bounce into touch, the crowd would be up and about. That was, and there was no 40-20s, but it was just, so you practice that torpedo kick. Well, my very first touch in first grade, I come off the bus, right? And St. George are playing Canberra, and it's a Friday night, and I get off the bus in Canberra, and I'm playing reserve grade. I'm 17 or 18. And I'm getting ready for the game. And David Waite says, geez, you get ready early, mate. And I said, Wadey, I'm always sort of first ready. He said, what, 3 hours before the game? And I went, holy shit, I'm playing first grade. So my head was completely off for 3 hours. I'm playing first grade. Mark Gasnier actually was debuting in reserve grade. So Mark Caine was out with a hamstring injury. I was going to first grade. Mark Gasnier was going as a 16-year-old for his first game in reserve grade. And I got on, and like with about 15 to go, it's 28 points to 4, we're getting flogged. And it's full time, it's 28-24. So not on my doing, but it just played out that way. Blacklock went berserk, Mundine went berserk, and we made this big comeback, just fell short. But my very first touch in first grade, a little short side, I've never done this before or after in my life. Adrian Brunker was a left winger, and for some reason, I've kicked it with my left foot. As I said, never in my life before or after have I done it. My very first touch, left foot grubber, Adrian Brunker scores a try, and I'm like, wow, that's my first touch. My second touch is this giant torpedo bomb from my childhood hero, Ricky Stewart, freezing Canberra night, bang, 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 bang. And to this day, Jamie, I've got no idea how I caught it. The whole time that ball went up, I'd idolised him that much. I knew I was going to drop the ball. My hands come out, and to this day, I still don't know how the friggin' hell it stayed in my hands. But somehow it did. And the other thing is I'm convinced about, which I'm sure didn't happen, but it's in my head. I'm convinced that Brett Mullins pretty much did a one-on-one steal as we came down with the ball, but gave it back to me almost feeling sorry. I know that didn't happen. In my head, it just feels like that's what happened. But how I got up and played the ball after that spiral from Ricky Stewart, I'll never, ever, ever. Because if you drop that ball and you hit, like things change. And but that was my very first bomb, I suppose, from my childhood hero.
Yeah, wow, absolutely. Yeah, Ricky Stewart was a hell of a player, mate. And like you said, he probably won't be in the GOAT or the immortal sort of conversation, but he does deserve to be up there. His coaching career, not just his coaching career and his playing career, but he was an idol for a lot of kids growing up. So he's unfortunately going to miss out on that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So after footy, mate, was it 2006? I seen that your brother Tony makes his NRL debut for Cronulla, mate. How was that for you?
It was pretty good. Jess had made his debut as well. See, Jess was. I'll start with Jess first. Or Pud, as we've always called him, he made every single rep team in his whole life. So never in his life did he ever miss out on a team. And he got to first grade as an 18-year-old, played 4 games and said, you know what, I'm retiring. I've had enough. That's it. His actual debut, it's a famous story where he was playing for South. They weren't going too good. And he's told he's going to have his debut. So they're playing on the Saturday against the Melbourne Storm, Cronk, Slater, Smith, Inglis, all those. And so he's playing on the Saturday. And on the Thursday night, Russell Crowe got them all together and took them all out. And he flew up Warney and Merv Hughes, and they were just poleaxed, Like he wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Friday at Redfern before training. And it's just, that's how he played his debut. Played 4 games and said, you know what? I don't want to be a rugby league player. And I remember driving him to that game against Melbourne. And he had the shits. I said, what's wrong? He said, well, was at the Sydney Football Stadium, so there was no hill that he's talking about. But he said, I just want to be on the hill with my mates having beers, and not be on the field. And I said, well, there's no hill for starters at the Sydney Football Stadium, but I get what you're saying. And that's what he wanted to do, And I'll never forget, he got picked in the Australian schoolboys team. They said, number 3, Jess Caine. And he went, F. I said, what's wrong? You got picked. He goes, all my mates are going on a Fair Star cruise ship, at that same time. And now I've got to go to England and play in this schoolboys, Australian school. And he genuinely just didn't want to do that. Played 4 games, retired. And you know what? Good on him. Do what you want to do in life. As my late grandfather-in-law would say, take my advice, son, and please yourself. Don't be a footballer because other people want you to do it. And he didn't want to do it. And he's lived a good life and happy life and has no regrets. Tony, who's 14 months his junior or whatever the months is, they're pretty close. He was always the hardest try, and didn't have the natural skills of Pud and didn't always make the teams. But he worked his ass off and got himself to a point where there was 8 first-grade clubs chasing him. Everyone was saying he's the next Danny Badiris, and everyone's watching him. And it's late in June, or June 30, other clubs can sign him. So he's at Cronulla. So Cronulla going, okay, we better play him to have a look at him, and then we've got a couple of weeks to sign him, right? Anyway, he comes out. We're over in France, Kobe and I, and there's no sort of streaming back in those days. But you could watch the NRL stats. And at halftime, Tony Caine, no runs, no tackles. So he hasn't been on. 54 minutes, 1 tackle, 1 run. Oh, Kobe, Tone's on the field. We're watching the stats. 2 runs, 2 tackles. Refresh. 2 runs, 2 tackles. Refresh. The score hasn't changed, so he wouldn't have been hooked, like what. And then we later find out Brett Kamali's the halfback. He's screaming for the ball. My brother Tone's a dummy half. He sees the red stripe. 40-20s has just come in. I can kick a 40-20. So dummies to Kamali, goes for the 40-20. Steve Price, the front row at the Warriors, dives into his knees and his foot keeps going through all the way, completely where your leg's not supposed to go. And they said he'd never play again. But to his credit, come back, played first grade, and Nathan Brown actually did a handshake deal with him. He said, mate, if you're still available June 30, I'm going to sign you. And those 8 clubs all deserted him, including the Sharks, because he was told he'd never play again. Brownie, to his credit, sent through a contract to the hospital and said, mate, I told you I was going to sign you, handshake deal, if you're still available on June 30. So you're there. So to his credit, he spent the whole off-season just on a Swiss ball on a wall trying to get his knee right. Round 1 against the Gold Coast, he's the starting number 9. So he just worked his ass off to get his knee right, played the whole year, and he was on big dollars for a bloody 18, 19-year-old. And this was very, very well above his years. He knew the favour that Brownie had done for him, but he also knew that his knee was absolutely stuffed and he couldn't give Brownie any more. So he walked into the office to Brownie and said, Brownie, thanks for that contract, ripped it up. He said, go and spend it on a player who can give you their absolute best with a healthy body because my knee's shot. And so he walked away with no money and allowed Brownie, who was under the pump as a coach at the time, to go and sign another player.
Mate, that takes a lot of the guts to do that, mate.
Yeah,
that's great work from your brother, mate. Like I'm speechless from that, for quite literally.
Yeah.
So after you retire, mate, you get into the media stuff. Fox Sports, you're obviously the face of Sportsbet. You still do a lot of that stuff on TV. You're working with SEN now. How did that sort of come about, mate?
I'd always wanted to do radio. So even when I was in England, I was working with BBC and since a kid, one of the schools I went to had 11 people in the whole school, kindergarten to year 6, out at Newbridge near Blaney. And there was a population of 80 and we had owned the pub. And I remember I would turn up on Melbourne Cup Day and there was a cricket pitch and the field had long grass and there's a 400-metre track. So I set out handicaps where the year 6 kid would have, which is the only other year 6 kid at the school is me plus him, he had to run the 400. And my sister, who was in kindergarten, she had to run like 150 metres, right? And I'd be there with these big orange witches' hats calling the Melbourne Cup, and they'd be numbered, around the bend they come, Sedestin being taken on by Letzelo, Might and Pout, blah, 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 whatever the names were back at the time. And I'd always had this fascination for some reason with race callers. Ian Craig and Greg Miles, loved all those guys. And so growing up, I probably wanted to be more of a race caller, and I'll probably one day I'll have a crack at it, but it just hasn't played out that way. But and then I'd always been in the car commentating and just doing stuff that I knew it was weird, but I also knew that no one else was doing it. So when people just retire from football, my wife used to get sort of paranoid about, they're going to retire and take your spot or do this. I said, darling, I've been doing this stuff my whole life. Like people who finish playing rugby league aren't going to be where I'm at straight away. They'll just relax, And that goes with anything in life. If you play the piano or violin or whatever it is, whatever you spend time at, you're going to have a significant advantage over everyone else, aren't you? And you're allowed to be arrogant about that, I suppose. But but how I got into sports bet, I just was invited to a luncheon and Matt Tripp was at the table I was on and I was telling a few stories and they signed an integration asset with, they're not around anymore, 1HD, who were Channel 10 sort of sports program. And they said, we need someone next Thursday to stand in a corner and talk some sports bet odds. And I did that on April Fool's Day in 2009. And here we are in 2021. I'm still doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. I mean, I didn't realise, because I've seen you on the sports bet stuff so much, I didn't realise that you played footy. And then it was I think I looked you up, or I think it could have been even on the Matty John show, and I was like, oh crap! Just did not realise that you played footy as well. I've only got a couple more questions for you, mate. I know your time's pretty short, so just have you got any advice for kids in sports? Life in general. I mean, I'm a father of 12 kids. So, I mean, 10 of them live here. So
You're a father of 12 kids?
Yeah, mate, yeah.
You have 12 kids?
Yep.
Holy dooly.
Yeah, and I've got 10 of them that live in my house, so.
Wow.
Yeah. Have you got advice for kids, in life and sports in general that, I could pass on, the people that watch this later on could pass on to their kids?
Yeah, absolutely. The best advice. So, Jamie, you've got your 12 kids, right? Your family. And in reality, right? In reality, 95% of your mind is occupied by yourself, your family, right? That's 95% of the time, which means there's 5% of your mind shared with the rest of the world, me included, Billy Slater, whoever you can possibly think of, are squeezing that 5%, Oprah. So to the people who make it, calm the farm and pull the pole out of your backside, because everyone's so absorbed thinking about themselves. So you're not that important, right? But equally, don't hold yourself back because you're worried about what people think. They're like you. They're just, concerned about what's going on in their life. So for example, right, Tim Paine is topical at the moment. Tim Paine, right? Tim Paine, like, to him, it's the biggest thing in the world. But to you and to me, it's occupying a little part of our day, and day by day, it's going to be a nothing thing. So realistically, to Tim Paine, his world's imploding and everyone's out to get him. But the reality of it all is that, Tim, no one cares, mate. Like no one actually, they care when they read the paper. They go, oh, wow, Tim Paine. As soon as they put it there, Jamie's thinking about what the rest of Jamie's day is. And so my point around all of this convolutedly is, just be you. Just go out and be you. Don't worry about conforming. Don't worry about what other people think, because they're just not thinking about you. Even if I go on air and I did something stupid or said something stupid, people on Twitter would smash me, for example, right?
Yeah.
But the moment those people have smashed me on Twitter, I'm seeing it, my head's falling off, and the moment they've seen it, they're not actually thinking about it anymore. So just don't be governed by what other people think. Just go out there and attack. And I chatted with Peter Overton one night, who's a Sydney newsreader, and it was State of Origin. He came and he said, oh, mate, you're doing the cross without an auto cue. He said, why are you doing that? I said, well, Peter, I can't use a bloody auto cue. And B, if I muck it up, no one gives a shit anyway. I'll get smashed through Twitter at the time, but their lives just are too busy going on anyway. So just encourage people to be individuals and to run without fear of what people think. And I know that's a long way to get to, but that'd be my number one. And maybe that has helped being a new kid at so many schools. And, that's what I'd say, Jamie.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Awesome bit of advice, mate. With this, the 17th team coming in just recently, the Dolphins, obviously NRL's going to try to get an 18th team coming soon. What do you reckon of Perth's chances of becoming that 18th team?
I don't know of the chances, but I like it because, like, you think about the American sports and the time zones, and it gives you so many opportunities. So if we had New Zealand, the east coast of Australia, and then you throw in Perth, I think it's a no-brainer, really. But mate, you could answer that better than me. What do you actually think?
Well, me personally, I mean, I'd love to see it over here. The support is here for it. I mean, we've seen 2 years ago with the State of Origin in Perth. It's sold out an AFL stadium. 60,000 people at, and it's going to sell out again this year at Origin here. The support's here. And I think a lot of people are still hurt by the Western Reds being shafted when the Super League ARL got back together. So they're still iffy about it all happening. But I know the support's here for it. I mean, we've got a purpose-built stadium. I'm sure the government would get behind it. We've got freaking billionaires over here in the mining industry that would have already said they'd put money behind it. So, yeah, and you got people like Mark Geyer and all that sort of stuff that, and I've spoken to a few people and they couldn't understand why Perth has been left out for so long.
The other thing is too, like from a sponsorship point of view, whether you're Telstra or whoever it is, you're truly national. You've got a national footprint. I personally, I think, it's hard to think of a name, like the Broncos are taken, the Tigers are taken, and Bulldogs, all that. The Bears are a powerful brand, and honest to God, like the Bears are so far down the track that most kids coming through wouldn't even know who the Bears were. And there's following for the Bears. There's Perth Bears for me. I just think it works. Perth Bears, and the national. That's what I would do. But smarter people than me, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I reckon the Perth Bears would be a smart move as well. You'd take that foundation supportership from the North Sydney. They'll follow the Bears even though they're not in North Sydney.
Of course they will.
They'll follow them over here. And obviously they won't literally move over here, but they'll follow the team. And then it gives Perth their own brand as well. But yeah, that's just my opinion on the Perth team. I reckon it should happen, but yeah, we'll see. Yep. So besides for your sports bet stuff, mate, you talked about before you're on SEN. Is there anything else that you're up to these days?
No, mate, just the SEN, and we've got the rugby league coverage. SEN would cover more rugby league than any station in Australia, I would have thought. So if you love your rugby league, jump onto the SEN app. If you're over there in Perth, we would easily talk more league than any other radio station, and we commentate many, many games. So between the sports bet and SEN, that's it. 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. in Sydney time. Brian Fletcher and I have an afternoon program, which we're on. So you can also stream that. That'd be probably quite early for you guys, wouldn't it? It would be at lunchtime. About lunchtime, yeah. So that's on the SEN app. You can get us live there or the podcast, whatever else. But that's about it, Jamie.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's all I've got for you today, mate. So I really appreciate your time. And I completely understand about last week, Rick. So you don't even need to apologise about that. But yeah, like I said, thank you for your time today, mate. And all the best with everything.
All the best, Jamie. 12 kids. Wow, mate. I got 4 and I thought I was doing it tough. Your time's that by 3. Well done on spreading the love over there for the rugby league too, mate.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, mate.
Yeah, Jamie.
Have a good day.